High-end cameras capture images usually in Camera RAW format, but they can be set to capture both JPEG and RAW at the exact same time. And you could think of the JPEG as the camera doing the developing for you. It's doing color, contrast, sharpness, overall detail. But Camera RAW is the closest thing you can get to a digital negative and gives you, as the photographer and the developer of the image, the most control to get what you saw in the scene into the photograph. I'm going to start by double-clicking on this flower for Begin, and let's take a look at the Camera Raw interface. Camera Raw is a plugin to both Photoshop and Bridge, which is a little piece of software that works inside the program. If you shoot in RAW, Camera Raw comes up automatically. But some high-end cameras can shoot in TIFF or JPEG if they didn't turn the RAW on, and Camera Raw can also open those formats. It can't open PSD format or Photoshop native, but it can be run as a filter in Photoshop. In the dialog, I've actually gone to full screen mode, which is up here at the right. When you toggle full screen mode, it hides your menu bar and title bar and just gives me more workspace. Across the top here you have tools that work within Camera Raw: zooming, your hand tool, cropping, adjustments, red eye removal, and a lot more. At the lower left you have your zoom level, so I could zoom in here, but your same zoom shortcuts, Command plus and minus or Control plus and minus, or Command 0 to fit in window, Control 0 on the PC platform, work here as well. And this is your workflow. It shows me what color profile my camera has, what bit depth it's capturing, and the resolution. And you could actually change these settings if you need to, but I don't normally mess with them, so I'm going to hit cancel. I set my color profile on the camera itself. Usually there are two options, sRGB or Adobe RGB, and I prefer Adobe RGB for print. Now there used to be a preview checkbox up here, but there are new preview options at the lower right, and I'll show you those once we make some moves. At the top right is the histogram, and the histogram is a visual map of where the data lies in the image: the blacks, the shadows, the exposure, and the highlights. And as you mouse over the image, you get red, green, and blue values, and also camera information, f-stop, ISO setting. And these are the adjustments you can make, and there are a lot of categories of them. Most of what you want to do can be done in the basic adjustments, but there is the ability to adjust tone curve, either parametric or point, which is more like Photoshop workflow, where you can create S-curves or bend the dial to do some really extreme movements. And I could drag those points out of there. You can also sharpen. Camera Raw images aren't automatically sharpened. You control where and how it's sharpened and how much. You can make big moves to hue, saturation, and luminance to really fine-tune individual colors in the image. And split toning will do the highlights in one solid color and the shadows in another solid color, creating a two-tone image effect. But you have to move saturation to really see it, and I don't use it that frequently, but it's very nice for some special effects. I can double-click on any dial to set it back to the defaults. You also have lens correction. You can load camera profiles to do corrections to certain lenses. You can remove little halos that are caused in some digital camera shots, and I could do manual distortions of the image. We can also do post-crop vignetting, which can burn the edge of the image, which is a photography trick to kind of draw your eye towards the center of a photo. It really gives photos that little extra punch. We can do camera calibration. We could save everything that we've done as a preset to quickly load frequently used settings. And we can take snapshots to save different versions of the same file. Maybe a black and white version, a color version, a slightly desaturated or less vibrant version. I'm just going to do some basic adjustments. So I notice this has a little bit of a blue cast, so I'll slide the temperature to the right to get rid of that. I will also usually pull tint one direction or the other if I see a cast to see if I'm helping the image. And I usually start with exposure, making it brighter or darker, but I tend to go a little lighter in exposure than I want because blacks will often bring back that contrast or detail. Then I could move whites, which will technically clip the image. In fact, there's a little warning in the histogram here. When I'm blowing out colors or removing too much highlight detail, you'll see it turn red in whites. And if that does happen and you want brighter whites, highlights will protect that or bring that detail back. For specular highlights, things that are flashes on chrome or sparkle on jewelry, it may be fine to let that go, but if it's a real object, you want to make sure you preserve that detail. I can open up the shadows a bit to see in between those leaves if I'd like, but I like them a little bit darker in this image. I can increase contrast and add clarity, which is mid-tone contrast. All right, and then often I'll dial vibrance up just a little bit. And if I look at my preview options, I tend to like the middle button. It's closest to the preview checkbox we had in earlier versions of Photoshop or the Camera Raw plugin. So you can hit the letter P to see this change. P for preview, before, after. Or I can click, and I'll turn off this clipping warning, the arrow, before, after. Pretty radical moves in just small changes in the basic settings. Over here I have 4 modes to preview. It cycles before and after views. The first mode will do a whole fit-in window before and after. The second mode will do split screen before and after, so I could see the very big difference, like a gray cloud went away from the right side of this image. The third mode does top and bottom before and after. And the fourth mode does split screen in the other direction before and after. Again, it's like a gray cloud went away from the image. But I prefer the middle one, so I could just toggle before and after. The others I do find very helpful. And if you've gone too far in the image, there is the option to copy your current settings to before and then tweak it from there. But I'm going to undo that and see my before and after, and I'll hit done. If I pop back to Bridge, I actually kept, and I'll double click on folders to collapse it, but I kept a copy of the original Camera Raw or .nef file. So here are my developing done with Adobe Camera Raw, the camera's pre-baked JPEG, and the uncorrected Camera Raw. So undeveloped, developed by the camera, developed by me. And I'm much happier with this version. So do experiment with Camera Raw. If it's shot in RAW, you simply double-click to open it in the RAW editor. If it was a JPEG or a TIFF, you can choose File, Open in Camera Raw to force it to open in the Camera Raw editor.